If you're over 35 and your focus is shot, your phone is the prime suspect. Here's what's actually happening. When was the last time you sat down to do something important and got through it without picking up your phone? Not because someone called, not because you were waiting on a message, just because your brain demanded it. That pull you felt, that itch, that restless need to check something, anything, that is not a personality flaw. That is neuroscience. And if you are a man over 35, what is happening inside your brain right now is fundamentally different from what is happening in a 22-year-old's brain sitting right next to you. The vulnerability is real, it is biological, and your phone is exploiting every single weakness with surgical precision. By the end of this video, I am going to show you 4 specific ways your phone is rewiring your brain, and more importantly, I am going to help you identify which one is doing the most damage to you personally, because they do not all hit the same. Stay with me, because number 3 genuinely surprises almost everyone. After 35, your baseline dopamine production starts to decline. This is a documented biological reality. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that drives motivation, focus, goal-directed behavior, and the feeling of reward when you accomplish something meaningful. It is not just the pleasure chemical, it is the anticipation chemical. It is the thing that makes you want to pursue a goal before you have achieved it. When your natural dopamine levels are already trending downward with age, and then you hand your brain a device specifically engineered by billion-dollar companies to flood your reward system with cheap, artificial dopamine hits hundreds of times per day, you have created a perfect storm. Your aging reward system becomes increasingly dependent on those artificial spikes, and your capacity for the deep, sustained effort that used to define you starts to erode faster than it otherwise would. This is not about willpower. This is chemistry meeting engineering, and right now, the engineering is winning. Mechanism number 1, dopamine receptor downregulation. Here is how dopamine is supposed to work. You set a goal. Your brain releases a small amount of dopamine to motivate you toward it. You work hard. You achieve the goal. Your brain rewards you with a bigger dopamine release, and you feel genuinely satisfied. That cycle is what built civilizations. It is what drove men to start businesses, build families, and solve hard problems. That cycle requires patience, delayed gratification, and the ability to not tolerate discomfort. Your phone destroys that cycle from the ground up. Every notification, every scroll, every swipe delivers a tiny dopamine spike. It is small, but it is instant, effortless, and infinitely repeatable. When your brain is exposed to frequent, low-effort dopamine spikes over time, it adapts. It downregulates your dopamine receptors. Essentially, it reduces the number and sensitivity of the receptors that respond to dopamine. This is the same adaptation mechanism that drives tolerance and addiction. Things that used to feel rewarding, building something, finishing a project, a meaningful conversation, a long run, they feel flat, muted. The satisfaction is not as sharp as it used to. Think about your 25-year-old self who could sit down and focus on something for 5 or 6 hours without even noticing time passing. The difference is not just youth. Your dopamine system was intact. Your receptors were sensitive. Deep work was genuinely rewarding. Now it feels like effort before it even begins. And that feeling is not you losing discipline. That is receptor downregulation in action. Mechanism number 2, prefrontal cortex disruption. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that makes you a functioning adult. It handles planning, decision-making, impulse control, emotional regulation, and the ability to hold a complex thought long enough to do something useful with it. It is the seat of everything we associate with mature, effective human performance. And it is the part of your brain most directly damaged by compulsive phone use. Every time you are in the middle of a cognitively demanding task and you switch to your phone, your prefrontal cortex does not smoothly pause and resume. It has to completely disengage from the task, shift context, process the new stimulus, and then attempt to rebuild the cognitive structure it was working with before. Research on task switching consistently shows that this process takes far longer than people realize. Some estimates suggest it can take over 20 minutes to return to full cognitive depth after an interruption. If you are checking your phone every 10 to 15 minutes, which is average behavior for most smartphone users, you are never actually reaching deep cognitive performance during your working. You are skimming across the surface of your own intelligence. After 35, the prefrontal cortex begins a slow but measurable structural decline. The connections between neurons do not fire as crisply. The brain's ability to sustain focused attention requires more deliberate effort than it did at 25. That does not mean you are less intelligent. It means the hardware requires more intentional management. Chronic phone use is like running software on a machine that is already working hard to perform and then adding hundreds of background processes every hour. The machine slows down. It crashes more often. Work that should feel natural starts to feel exhausting. Most men describe this as brain fog, a sense of mental dullness that was not there a decade ago. Mechanism number 3, sleep architecture damage. Most men know that screens before bed affect sleep quality, but what they do not fully understand is how catastrophic the specific type of sleep disruption caused by phone use is for the male brain after 35. When you use your phone in the hour before sleep, two separate damage mechanisms activate simultaneously. First, the blue light emitted by your screen suppresses melatonin production, delaying sleep onset and reducing total sleep time. But the second mechanism is the one that changes everything. The cognitive and emotional stimulation from what you are consuming, the social media, the news, the videos, the messages, elevates your arousal level and activates your brain's threat detection systems right before sleep. This disrupts your ability to enter the deep, slow-wave sleep stages that are responsible for memory consolidation, physical recovery, and critically, dopamine receptor restoration. Your brain actually uses deep sleep to repair and resensitize the dopamine receptors that get worn down throughout the day. When you consistently disrupt your deep sleep architecture with late-night phone use, you are preventing your brain from doing the overnight maintenance it needs to reset your reward system. You wake up the next day with a slightly more depleted dopamine baseline than the day before. Then you reach for your phone first thing in the morning to compensate for feeling flat. And you have just completed the damage cycle before 8 a.m. For men over 35, this matters more than it does for younger men because your deep sleep naturally decreases with age anyway. Your phone is taking what little you have left. Mechanism number 4, attention span erosion. This is the most visible symptom, but it is actually the last consequence in a longer chain of damage. By the time attention span is noticeably collapsing, the other three mechanisms have usually been operating for months or years. Your phone delivers content in extremely short, high-stimulation bursts. Short videos, rapid social feeds, fragmented notifications, quick-hit headlines. Your brain is extraordinarily adaptive. It learns to operate in the mode you repeatedly practice. When you spend the majority of your waking hours consuming content in 5-second, 10-second, 30-second increments, your brain recalibrates its baseline expectation for stimulation. It begins to experience anything slower or less stimulating as genuinely uncomfortable, even painful in a neurological sense. This is why sustained reading feels harder than it used to. This is why sitting in a meeting without checking your phone feels like resistance training. This is why long-form thinking, the kind required to actually solve complex problems or build something meaningful, feels almost inaccessible on most days. Your brain is not broken. It has been trained. The training has been continuous, daily, and extremely effective. It just has not been training in the direction you would have chosen if you had been paying attention. Now, here is where we get practical. Understanding the mechanisms is useless without knowing which one is the primary threat for you specifically. Let me walk you through a quick behavior audit. There are 4 patterns, each corresponding to the mechanism that is doing the most damage to your particular brain. Pattern 1, the reward seeker. This man checks his phone constantly throughout the workday, not for specific information, but because deep work feels unrewarding. If you find that the idea of sitting with a hard task feels genuinely joyless, and that your phone is the thing you reach for when work feels flat, dopamine receptor downregulation is likely your primary problem. Pattern 2, the fragmented worker. This man intends to do focused work but finds himself checking his phone every 10 to 20 minutes without conscious decision. If your workday's series of half-finished thoughts interrupted by phone checks you barely remember initiating, prefrontal cortex disruption is your biggest issue. Pattern 3, the late-night scroller. This man does not use his phone excessively during the day, but the phone is always the last thing in his hand before to bed. If you consistently watch videos, scroll social media, or read messages in the 30 to 60 minutes before bed, and you wake up feeling unrested, Sleep architecture damage is the mechanism that is quietly dismantling everything else. Pattern 4. The short-form consumer. This man's primary phone behavior is short-form video content, quick news cycles, and fast-scrolling social feeds. If you find long-form content increasingly difficult to engage with, attention span erosion is your dominant pattern. Here's the honest truth. Your brain is not permanently damaged. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and rebuild itself, does not expire after 35. It ticks slows, but it does not stop. The same adaptability that allowed your phone to rewire your focus can be redirected to rebuild it. The evidence for recovery is genuinely strong. Men who make targeted changes to their phone behavior report measurable improvements in focus, motivation, emotional stability, and sleep quality within weeks, not months, weeks. The brain responds faster than most people expect because the damage is largely functional, not structural. You have not lost capacity. You have had it temporarily rerouted. But that recovery has to be targeted. Random discipline rarely works here. What works is identifying your specific pattern and making precise behavioral adjustments that interrupt the exact mechanism doing the damage. Go to my channel, and there you can find free audit. It takes 20 minutes. It is free. It will help you identify your big 3 dopamine triggers, exactly which apps and habits are doing the most damage to your focus and motivation. And it will give you a specific protocol based on your personal behavior profile, not generic advice, not a list of things you already know, an actual targeted intervention for your specific brain. Do this audit if you're not broken. You should be sharp, capable, and motivated. You just need a clear picture of what is actually happening and a precise plan rather than vague advice about putting their phone down more. If you have watched this far, you are already someone who takes this seriously. Do not let this be another video you watched and then forgot. Go do the audit. Your brain built everything you have. It deserves the maintenance.